My name is Dorothy Miller. I'm 81 years old, and I've lived long enough to watch 3 generations of my family grow up in the same small neighborhood here in Cleveland, Ohio. I've buried friends. I've watched coworkers retire and disappear. I've seen people spend the best years of their lives chasing things that meant absolutely nothing in the end. So listen carefully, because if there is one thing age gives you, it's clarity. And clarity is ruthless. If I could give you back the time you're about to waste after 60. Believe me, I would, but I can't. What I can do is tell you the truth most people don't realize until their 70s or 80s. Almost everything you're worrying about right now will quietly stop mattering, much sooner than you think. And that realization doesn't come from regret. It comes from finally seeing where your energy has been going all these years. Stay with me for a moment. Because today I want to talk about 7 things people over 60 keep wasting their lives on. And the 7th one is the hardest truth of all. It feels reasonable. It even feels noble. But it can quietly steal years of your life if you're not careful. So if anything I say today sounds familiar to you, write it down in the comments. I read every single one. Not because I need the attention, but because at my age, hearing other people's wisdom feels like finding gold in the dirt. All right, let's start with the first mistake. 1. Competing with other people. Most of us were raised in competition mode. When I was young in the 1960s, everything felt like a scoreboard. Grades, careers, promotions, who bought the bigger house, whose kids went to the better college. Even retirement turned into a competition. Who travels more? Who owns a bigger RV? Who has the perfect grandkids? But somewhere around 60, something strange happens. You realize you're not even in the same race anymore. You're just running circles trying to prove something that nobody is keeping score of. I remember a neighbor of mine, Frank Dawson, a retired engineer down the street. At 67, he was still obsessed with comparing himself to everyone else. Who invested better? Who retired earlier? Who had more money in their 401k? And one afternoon, sitting on his porch, he told me something that stuck with me. He said, "Dorothy, I spent 40 years climbing a ladder just to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall." That's what comparison does. It tricks you into wanting things you never actually wanted. You see someone your age buy a bigger house, and suddenly you feel behind. But deep down, you don't even want that house. You just want the feeling of not being behind. Here's the truth. After 60, the only person worth competing with is the person you used to be. Ask yourself one simple question. Are you more peaceful today than you were 5 years ago? More honest with yourself? More comfortable in your own skin? If the answer is yes, then congratulations. You're winning in a way most people never will. 2. Letting your career define who you are. This one hits people like a freight train, because for most of our lives, the first thing we said when meeting someone was our job title. I'm a teacher. I'm an accountant. I'm a manager. I'm in real estate. For 30 or 40 years, your career becomes your identity, but then retirement comes, and suddenly someone asks, "So, what do you do?" And for the first time in decades, you don't know how to answer. I saw this happen to my brother-in-law, Richard Miller, after he retired from the steel plant. For 40 years, he was Rich the supervisor. Then one day he wasn't, and it shook him more than anyone expected. Because when your identity is built entirely around your job, the moment that chapter ends, you start wondering who you are without it. But here's the thing. Your career may have been meaningful, but it was never the whole story. You are not just what you produced. You are the conversations you had, the people you helped, the kindness you gave when nobody was watching. The real second chapter of life isn't about climbing higher. It's about going deeper, reconnecting with curiosity, trying things nobody pays you for, painting, gardening, writing letters, mentoring younger people. The world convinced us our value came from productivity. But at this age, you finally see the truth. Your value was never your job title. 3. Forcing yourself to finish things that don't matter. This lesson took me decades to learn, because I grew up hearing the same sentence over and over again. Quitters never win. So I forced myself to finish everything. Books I hated, TV shows that lost me after the second episode, community committees I joined out of guilt, projects that stopped meaning anything halfway through, just so I could say, well, at least I finished. But after 70, something shifts in your thinking. You realize time is no longer an abstract idea. It's finite, real, measurable. You start doing the math, and suddenly spending 6 hours on something mediocre feels like throwing gold into the lake. Finishing something pointless doesn't make you disciplined. It just makes you stubborn. Life after 60 is too valuable to spend enduring things you don't even enjoy. You have permission now to stop, to close the book, to leave the meeting, to turn off the show, and redirect that time toward things that actually make you feel awake again. Because time is the most valuable thing you have left. And once you see that clearly, you stop wasting it. All right, let's keep going. Because the next 4 are where things start getting uncomfortable. And if you're over 60, you've probably felt at least one of these truths knocking on your door already. 4. Doing things just because you feel obligated. Let me tell you a story. About 10 years ago, when I was 71, my neighbor Margaret Collins invited me to yet another neighborhood planning meeting. Now Margaret meant well. But those meetings lasted 2 hours, and nothing ever changed. Same arguments, same complaints about parking, same people talking just to hear themselves talk. And I remember sitting there thinking something that surprised even me. Why am I still doing this? Not because I cared, not because it mattered, but because I felt like I was supposed to. You see, a lot of us grew up believing we had to say yes to everything. Family events we don't want to attend, committees we join out of guilt, helping people who never help us back. We confuse kindness with people-pleasing. But those are two very different things. Kindness comes from choice. People-pleasing comes from fear. Fear of disappointing someone. Fear of looking selfish. Fear of being judged. And by the time many people reach their 60s, they're exhausted because they've spent decades living other people's expectations. Here's what I finally learned. If you're only doing something because you feel pressured to, that pressure is stealing your peace. At this age, your time is precious. Spend it where your presence is wanted, not just expected. When you give from genuine choice, you give with your whole heart. And that feels very different from giving out of obligation. 5. Needing to be right. Oh, this one almost ruined a friendship of mine. A few years ago, my old friend Harold Bennett and I got into an argument about politics over coffee. It started small, but within minutes we were both raising our voices like two stubborn teenagers. Neither of us was listening. We were both just trying to win. And suddenly it hit me. 2 people in their 70s, arguing like it was the final round of a boxing match, over something neither of us had the power to change. That's when I realized something important. Most arguments aren't about truth. They're about ego. People aren't trying to understand each other. They're trying to defeat each other. And the worst place for this today? The internet. You see people arguing endlessly in comment sections, trying to convince strangers who have already made up their minds. Hours wasted. Energy drained. peace destroyed, all for the prize of saying, "I told you so." But here's the quiet power you gain with age. You stop needing the last word. You learn to say something magical. You might be right. Or sometimes, you simply say nothing at all. And when you walk away from arguments that don't matter, you reclaim something far more valuable than victory. You reclaim your sanity. 6. Keeping people in your life who drain your energy. By the time you reach your 60s, you know exactly who these people are. They only call when they need something. Every conversation becomes about their problems. You leave every interaction feeling tired, heavy, and somehow smaller. I call them energy vampires, not because they're evil, but because they are expensive. They cost you emotional energy, mental peace, sometimes even your confidence. I had someone like that in my life for years, a distant cousin named Gloria Whitman. Every phone call was the same, 2 hours of complaints, drama, problems she never intended to solve. And every time we hung up, I felt like someone had drained the battery out of my soul. Finally, one day, I stopped answering every call. Not out of cruelty, but out of self-respect. And something amazing happened. My days became quieter, lighter, more peaceful. Here's the truth most people learn late in life. You don't owe anyone unlimited access to your energy. Your presence is not a public resource. Spend your time with people who leave you feeling more alive, not more exhausted. And sometimes the best company is simply your own peaceful silence. 7. Expecting people to become who you wish they were. This one is the hardest lesson of all, because it often involves the people we love the most. For years, we hold on to hope that a difficult sibling will change, that a selfish friend will grow, that a distant child will suddenly become closer, and hope can be a beautiful thing. But sometimes, hope becomes a trap. Because we're not loving the person who exists, we're loving the version of them we wish existed. I watched my sister Carol Miller struggle with this for years. She kept waiting for someone in her life to become more supportive, more thoughtful, more present. She kept believing that if she just gave them more time, more patience, more understanding, they would eventually change. But people show you who they are, again, and again, and again. And at some point in life, you have to believe them. This doesn't mean becoming bitter. It means becoming clear-eyed, accepting reality exactly as it is, not as we wish it would be. And when you finally accept who someone truly is, you gain freedom. Freedom to decide, can I live peacefully with this person as they are? Or do I need to create distance to protect myself? That moment of clarity is where peace begins, not in changing them, but in seeing the truth. If anything I said today spoke to you, take a moment and write about it in the comments. At 81 years old, I've learned that wisdom grows when we share it. And if you're trying to make your second chapter of life calmer, wiser, and more meaningful, subscribe and join me here again, because we're all still learning, no matter how many birthdays we've had. Thank you for spending these minutes with me, and take good care of yourself.